All right, good morning, everyone. Here in the room is Christina Slattery, Commissioner of Business and Community Development, and Kylie Palmer, our Deputy Commissioner over Financial Incentives. So thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar, primarily on statutory updates for the Kentucky Business Investment Program. But we've got some other great changes that we're going to talk about today as well. So a couple housekeeping things. Submit your questions throughout through the chat at the bottom. We hope that we'll be able to get through this fairly quickly and leave plenty of time in the end to ask questions. So submit throughout and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, will be posted on the website, and I will email it out to all of the folks that I reached out to for this particular invitation. So if you've taken notes, know that you're going to get an official copy coming your way. And then we had some great questions about site selectors and if site selectors could join this particular meeting. We really designed this first webinar for you all, our local partners that work with us on these incentives. But we do have a strategy around updating site selectors as well about the new flexibility from the program and may even send them this webinar too. So we will continue to get this out. But most important, wanted to speak to this group. Before I start, I want to plug a couple times a couple of other webinars that are coming up. So today, again, primarily talking about KBI, but on June 29th at 10 a.m., we will have a webinar co-hosted with KAED and the Site Selector Group on KPDI in the next round of funding that is coming out. And then on July 13th at 3 p.m., Site Selection Group is going to do a webinar for us specifically on completing an RFI. So again, you can find the links to those on the KAED webpage, on the Facebook page, or let us know if you have questions. But a lot of great opportunities to learn more about our different programs. So starting out, I really just want to say thank you. You know, we have a lot to celebrate. We have a lot to, work through on our various incentive programs, but there were a lot of great ideas that arose in the turf meeting process, a lot of great discussions and strategy on what we need for our incentives to be more competitive. And overall, we feel really, really pleased with the changes that were made. This slide highlights some of those items. Again, today we're going to focus primarily on incentives, but I just wanted to take the time and thank you for all of your support and collaboration here. Talent attraction program, high growth businesses, extending flights. Our team had a great meeting yesterday where we looked at every line item and legislative change that came to the cabinet and assigned project points on each one of these items so that you will begin to hear from us in the next coming weeks, if you haven't already, about particular line items that will be impacting your community. So if you're waiting to hear, look for a project manager to be reaching out soon to discuss next steps. All right, so let's get started with the changes. So primarily, just to level set here, a lot of questions and some of our biggest changes around heritage county. So I want to start with, what is a heritage county? Now, if you've utilized KPDI and the grant program in the last few years, you are familiar with heritage counties. There are 5 different tiers of heritage counties. Tier 1, 2, and there are 5 different tiers of counties. Tiers 1, 2, and 3 classify as a heritage county, which essentially means that the county has a population ranking greater than or equal to 97. So if you are used to, as many of us are, enhanced incentive counties, Enhanced is going away for the purpose of new KBI programs, anything approved after July 1st of this year. So enhanced will still be applicable to all of the existing programs that we have that have been approved. But for anything new going forward, it's just going to be heritage counties, specifically based on population. So there are two different maps. The one you're looking at now has two different designations. In white there, those are other counties. In blue, those are heritage counties. This map will be used for KBI. So if you were shaded blue here, starting July 1st, you can plan on for KBI falling into that heritage county designation. The other map that I showed with the 5 different tiers, this one is for Bluegrass State Skills, Grant, and KPDI. So again, all of this will be available on the website, but it's really created an alignment across programs for us. If you remember, at one point, there was a different designation through KPDI, KBI, Bluegrass State Skills, and it causes confusion. And you may qualify for certain benefits in one program, different benefits in another. Now you can expect to have this consistency across programs. This data will update every 2 years and just updated. So where you are on this map will stay the same until 2028. When we enter our new fiscal year in 2028, we will look at the data, repopulate the map. Okay, moving forward, we're going to talk specifically about KBI. So just for familiarity, this is our most popular incentive tool, our greatest opportunity to partner with our local communities, cities, and counties on providing a wage assessment or corporate income tax credit to new and expanding industries. As all of our programs are, this is performance-based, and it has a preliminary final approval and activation, which I'll talk about here shortly. So let's get into just some of the basic requirements. Again, this has not changed. 10 new full-time jobs required, minimum investment of $100,000, all of the same types of companies, with the exception of an addition there at the bottom, research and development. So as we have been talking about in our strategy sessions, we want to laser focus in on supporting R&D, business services, headquarters types operations in Kentucky. This is a part of our blueprint, an area that is has the greatest opportunity for growth is in this sector. And so the addition of the research and development company item there is reflective of that goal. All other requirements are staying the same. Now we'll talk about the changes. So a big bulk, wanted to just illustrate again, timeline has stayed the same. We're going to be looking for those application materials at least 30 days prior to the KEDFA meeting, last Thursday of every month for that KEDFA meeting, with the exception of the end of the year when we combine for the holidays. And then that same flexibility on when the company goes to final, when the company activates. If you have questions, let us know. So the changes that are going to be reflected again as of July 1st. We've already talked about the first one. Enhanced incentive county is no more going forward. That is now replaced with heritage county based on the county population ranking. So when we are talking to our team internally, if we've got projects that we're working now that may go to KEDFA into the new year, we are talking about these updated changes, what those companies can expect. If you are a county that is going to either be in other county and now go to heritage or vice versa, you just want to be thinking about active deals that you have, talk through those things with us and how they may impact the project. 90-day look back on but for. So we want to talk about this one because really this was put in to help us not to work around the but for clause. The spirit, the intention of everything that but for stands for still applies and really applies to all of the state's incentives programs. These are programs that are to be used to close a gap, that are to be used in a competitive situation where the incentives solve an issue or are the reason that we are able to close a deal. That still exists. What this helps us to do is work through unique situations where a company may have to place an order on a long lead time piece of equipment before a KEDFA approval. Doesn't mean that the project's absolutely happening in Kentucky, but it's a piece of equipment they have to order no matter where they decide to expand their business. It could be for due diligence on a particular site that the company is considering. There were times where those types of costs would have us essentially force a project maybe to go to KEDFA before it was ready, before the company was ready, we were ready. It just pressed our timelines and had us really think about, when we needed to take that project for approval. So we now have a 90-day look back from preliminary approval to be able to include eligible cost. So for this group, this is not something that we're broadly sharing with projects and consultants to advocate to include additional costs before 90 days. We don't want to overthink it. We want to use common sense here. When do we need to share, activate this 90-day look back on projects to, be more business friendly and to make an activity work for a project? So again, this is something that we are excited to have that is going to give us some additional flexibility. And if you have questions, obviously just something we can talk through. All right, heritage counties, we talked about this already. Increased wage thresholds. So our minimum wage requirement on our programs has always been based upon the federal minimum wage. Whatever the federal minimum wage is, 150% of that federal minimum wage is where we set our criteria. It was pretty low with the federal minimum wage being at $7.25. Too low to really align with the standards and the goals and the types of projects that we are seeing and that we want to attract. So what you will now see is a new requirement on wage thresholds. 200% of federal minimum wage in a heritage county, 300% in all other counties, and those numbers are calculated there. So yes, if you are working a project and the minimum wage without benefits does not meet that criteria, it will not be eligible for KBI. This is a new criteria, again, going forward July 1. Consistent with our desire to support business services, headquarters, IT related companies, we've expanded some of our eligible costs, specifically as our startup costs, to include things like software, recurring software, computer and office equipment. Many of us have worked those projects that may not have a huge investment number because they're high wage IT companies, but have some costs and have a great number of new high paying jobs. So this is a reflection of work that really we heard from our local communities, primarily in Louisville and Lexington and Northern Kentucky, that gives us the ability to bump up what we can count as an eligible investment. Whereas KBI has traditionally favored higher investment, big manufacturing projects, this gives us additional flexibility. Inclusion of R&D companies, we've discussed previously. Again, aligning with that R&D headquarters desire to attract those types of companies, we've removed a cap, which says we can only consider eligible cost at $20,000 per job at activation. Not something that, you all would have to manage a lot, but on some of these projects that limited us in the way we were able to approve incentives. And for our existing companies, for KBIs, existing agreements may now be extended for 5 years for companies to make sure that they can maximize the benefits that we previously approved. So we're going to talk now about the refundability, how we got to where we are. But the reason for that 5-year extension is to acknowledge that there are great existing companies that were approved for KBI at a 5% income tax, that now that they are recovering on their project, because of the reduction of income tax, there is not enough for them to be able to recover the incentive that we committed to. So this is something that we will work through at a cabinet level, for specific projects. The legislator gave some, specificity around which existing agreements can access this. So if you have questions, again, let us know, but we now have the ability to take care of those existing companies with active agreements, and make sure we can deliver on the incentives that we promised. All right, let's talk now about the refundability piece. So just to recap, how did we get here? Why were we advocating for refundability? Again, great work done in the TURF meetings and steering committee meetings to discuss how to bridge the gap, if you will. So looking back at 2022 deals that we were working at that time, we were functioning under a 5% state income tax credit. As you all know, the wage assessment component of the KBI is a critical part of how we incentivize companies. So as that income tax dropped from 5% to where we see it today at 3.5%, we just literally had less to work with in eligibility to give back to these companies. These companies look at this as a cash payment based on jobs, based on investment and wage targets being met, that they can count on an annual, quarterly, semi-annual basis, working with us and the Department of Revenue to essentially get this refund, if you will, of income taxes that are being paid. So we were beginning to see and really feel that difference in the 5 and the 3.5%. For projects that we were negotiating, for existing agreements that we had, we needed a way to kind of bridge the gap between that income tax drop. And luckily, with your all's support, have come up with the ability to offer refundable credits on certain projects. So that is 1.25% of wages for other counties, 2.25% of wages for heritage counties. So we're really looking to make up that gap. And the way that we were able to describe this and talk to this, talk to the legislators about this, was pointing to sales tax that's going to be generated from the new employees that are hired. We did our research and saw that new employees that were coming on board would spend about 2.25% of their salary in sales tax generation each year. And so this is sort of the new bucket, if you will, that we were able to pull from to propose this refundability. Now, there are some limitations in this legislative action. We can only spend $1 million a year for other counties, $3 million a year for heritage counties. And that's important because you're going to see that reflected in how we're going to evaluate these projects as to which project we can offer refundability on. This will not be broadly available to all KBI projects. We will treat this as we do other cash incentive programs that have an annual cap. We have a set of criteria that we're going to talk through here with you at a high level. And there's really no, we want to be fully transparent here in this. So refundability for an other county is going to require, support from both the company, our project management team, you all as local developers to help work through these different items and make sure that this is the quality and the caliber of project to be able to access this cash refundable, very, very limited credit. So we're going to look at things like what are the wages of comparable employers in the county? And how competitive are the wages of this project? Do they have a strong workforce development strategy where they're doing work-based learning and they're engaged in the community? Do they offer a strong benefits package? How are the job creation targets? How do they match up with, job creation in the local county and relative to county population? We're going to give preference to companies that are leaders in their industry, key suppliers, headquarters operations, financial service entities. You can see the items here. And I think, again, back to common sense, what we want to attract the best of the best projects for Kentucky, and those that really are going to require this refundability are going to be those that are of that high caliber, that have full local participation and full local incentive support to be able to make those recommendations. So again, this will be shared with you, but this is how we are evaluating these. Very similar on refundability for heritage counties, looking at the top 3 employers, looking at training incentive programs, and really those high quality, high caliber projects. Let us know if you have any questions about those, but we wanted to be, very clear that, because of that cap and, the limited availability of funding, this will not be broadly available at this time on KBI projects. Okay, really very excited about this next change. Some of you, specifically anyone calling in from Georgetown or from Louisville, is probably familiar already with the Kentucky Jobs Retention Act. That program, up until these legislative changes, has 3 companies actively using it in Kentucky, and those are Ford, Toyota, and GE. Why, you may ask? This has been limited to companies that are in Kentucky for at least 5 years, targeting our existing companies and have at least 1,000 full-time employees. What we have seen change in this last legislative session gives us a way to work differently with our existing companies on retention projects. I know we have had several communications and conversations around, what do we really have to offer our existing industry? We have some great programs. We have small business tax credit. We have the Kentucky Reinvestment Program. So we do have some tools, but the KJRA, what this offers us for now in heritage counties only, any company with 250 employees or more, making a minimum investment of $25 million to reinvest in their facility and stay open and thriving in that community, can now get an incentive on their existing employees. No new job requirement here. This is strictly based on the retention of existing employees with a new eligible investment, an investment that will make the facility more technologically advanced, increase productivity, help to be able to serve a new customer that they may not be able to do otherwise, help us to keep great companies here in Kentucky. So for our other counties, all, the KJRA stays the same, but for our heritage counties, this is a new tool that we will now be able to access, again, for companies with over 250 employees. Wage assessment on existing employees. Okay, 2 other highlights here really specific for heritage counties. On Kentucky Product Development Initiative, so we did, as you all know, we received additional funding for a new round that's going to be rolling out soon. I mentioned already, and I will again, a webinar on June 29th at 10 a.m. to learn more about the next round of funding. But if you are in a heritage county, you will now be able to access up to $2.5 million as opposed to $2 million in grant funding. Please watch the webinar for any other changes there, but that's primarily what you're going to see as new out of the KPDI program. Bluegrass State Skills, our workforce and training program, also had some really substantial training upgrades. So if you're familiar with Bluegrass State Skills, you know that there is a grant program and there is a tax credit program. The grant program is highly sought out, has always been very competitive, and we offer that grant program to existing companies that are here in Kentucky already through a competitive scoring application process. And we pledge Bluegrass State Skills Corporation funding for new competitive or expanding competitive projects looking at Kentucky as part of our proposal process. So both in commitments and in competitive projects, we are able to leverage Bluegrass State Skills funding. $2,000 per trainee has always been our maximum amount of funding that we are able to pledge. And again, this is a reimbursement process. We are now able to, for commitment projects, competitive commitment projects, offer more per trainee. So in a heritage county, we are now able to pledge up to $4,500 per trainee. In another county, we are able to pledge up to $3,500 per trainee. So this allows us on, again, some of those same criteria we talked about earlier, really quality companies with high priorities around training and workforce development with clear training plans that are really going to lift up Kentuckians to go higher in how much we will commit in an award. For the competitive process that any company that's eligible in Kentucky can apply for already, you're going to see that stay at $2,000 per job. We are just now talking about enhanced benefits for some of our more competitive projects. And the reason we're not broadly implementing this is the cap on what we receive in funding didn't go up. We're still getting the same amount of funding, but able to offer a higher per job amount on select projects. So again, some great changes to Bluegrass State Skills as well. So that is our overview today of the various incentives. We have still 30 minutes. So if there are questions, we wanted to be able to address those now, or, come back to you if we need to do some other digging. But do we have any questions in the chat that we may address? Okay, not at this time. I'm shocked. Okay, you did such a good job. Thank you. Okay. If there are no other questions, thank you so much for joining, taking the time out of your day to listen. Again, we have recorded, we will send this out, we will post this, and we want to be your partners in this work. So if you have a specific project or a question about how this impacts your city, your county, your community, don't ever hesitate to reach out, and we will see you soon. Thank you all.